An open letter to the media with a list of accusations. That's all it took to destroy Alec Klein's life. What's worse, he wasn't even allowed to defend himself.
For years, Alec Klein, an investigative reporter and professor at a top U.S. university, investigated cases where people were wrongfully convicted. Then he found himself on the other side, falsely accused of sexual harassment and the center of a coordinated media attack. His life was destroyed. In his book, Aftermath, Alec shares his painful story and how he's helping prisoners excessively sentenced to gain their freedom.
Please welcome to the 700 Club, Alec Klein. Alec, it's nice to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Can you capsulize for us what happened to you in 2018 that really destroyed life as you knew it?
Yeah, absolutely. For much of my career, I had been investigating wrongful convictions and false accusations, and then suddenly I found myself being falsely accused myself. It was an utter shock, and what was put out there was wildly false. I was accused of mistreating some of my students and staffers, but this attack was engineered by a former employee whom I had let go. And the attacks, by the way, that were filed with the university, none of them had anything to do with any kind of sexual interaction. They were a hodgepodge of complaints. Students actually complained about their grades. They wanted an A- instead of a B+. They complained about the chair that they sat in my office, saying that it was lower to the ground than my chair. They called it a power differential. There was even a student who said that I mocked her foreign accent while on a reporting trip to Florida. Well, I checked my records and I wasn't in Florida when this happened. And if I could just add one last thing, as a professor, you are subjected to anonymous evaluations by students. So students can say whatever they want and there's no repercussions. Well, over the course of about a decade, students wrote these evaluations about me, and they never accused me of any kind of mistreatment. It was actually the opposite. They had a wonderful experience with me, how much they learned and how much I cared about them. And I can tell you that would be impossible if you had mistreated students. But there was a situation, it was put out in the media, and my life was instantly destroyed.
Why were you in the middle of all of this not allowed to defend yourself publicly?
Well, I got to tell you, this was at the height of the Me2 movement. And if I can add, I think the Me2 movement started with a worthy intent, which is that women over the centuries have been mistreated. But to some degree, I think it's gone too far. And what happened for some people, it was essentially guilt by accusation, trial by media. And when you're kind of attacked by the media mob, there's not much you can do. And I found myself in a situation where students I didn't even know were posting on Facebook a template, and they were saying, this is how you can complain about this guy. They were actually writing out the complaint for students to fill in. There were other students I didn't know who started a petition drive to have me ousted. It was instantaneous, and there was this hurricane, and I found myself in a situation where there was really nothing I could do. I just saw my life utterly destroyed overnight.
In the middle of all of this, you had a meltdown. A friend wound up giving you a book that was really an investigative book about faith, about whether Christ was real and the Word of God was true. How did that impact you?
It's one of the most important things in my life. I was investigating a wrongful conviction, and I turned to a friend and I said, why do bad things happen to good people? And he handed me this book, which was The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. I looked at the cover and I said, I'm not going to read this book because I didn't believe in anything. I was a non-believer. But I'm also an author, and so I have a tendency to read the first few pages of a book to see how an author begins their book. And I kid you not, Lee Strobel's book begins with the fact that he is a journalist, which is what I am, that he was investigating a wrongful conviction, which is what I do, and he was doing it in the Chicago area, which is where I was. So I thought, well, maybe I should read this book. So I'm reading Lee Strobel's book, and he makes a persuasive argument that there is historical proof about Jesus, which I didn't know about. I thought this was a myth. But the other thing was the book actually referred to another book, which was the Bible. And I thought, well, gosh, maybe I should read the Bible. So I picked up the Bible and I started with the Gospels. And the Gospels just blew my mind because everything that Jesus said applied perfectly to then, today, and into the future. And I began to actually share these stories with my children as sort of bedtime stories. And that got me on my journey to faith. So when my life was destroyed a couple of years later, I found myself sort of hearing from a lot of friends from around the country, including my friend who gave me the book. And it occurred to me that almost everyone who was coming to my aid was a follower of Jesus. It was hard to not notice that. So I found myself reading books about Jesus. I would order them on Amazon, one after another, almost every other day, reading books about Jesus. And somehow, and I can't explain this to you, but it brought me comfort and peace during all of this destruction.
You know, one of the things you say is that you never would have come to Christ if this had not happened to you, that you were too self-sufficient, you were too anti the myth of faith, that nothing would have penetrated that hard shell. Are you able to look at this now and see that God had a plan from the beginning and it was to bring you to a whole new place for a whole new purpose?
It's such a great question. I have to tell you, to some degree, I'm thankful for the destruction. I wouldn't want to happen again, but you know, it really did a lot of good things. You know, I was able to help a number of inmates in Oklahoma regain their freedom through commutation and parole during the time that my life was destroyed, because I was invited out to Oklahoma to help them with that. But it also brought me closer to my children, who I got to spend a lot more time with. But the most important thing for me was that it brought me to my faith. And I have to tell you, I don't think that would have happened had it not been for my destruction. So I am thankful. It's a part of my daily life. You know, now I go to church online, by the way, because of the coronavirus. I read the Bible every day. I read devotionals. I am not really the same person I was before. And for that, I am genuinely thankful for that, because I was the ultimate skeptic, and I am no longer.
I think of Romans 8:28 with your story. All things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purposes. Alec, your story, we are just touching the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to Alec's remarkable story. It's all here in his new book called Aftermath, and it is available nationwide. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much.
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much.